It's 5 o'clock in London, it's midday in New York, midnight in Hong Kong, 2 a.m. in Sydney, 9 a.m. in San Francisco, and 9:30 at night in Mumbai. Greetings, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world today. My name is Patrick L. Young. The IPO-VID livestream, Series 24, Episode 4 in the aggregate. We're at episode number 142. Start here. Who knows? We're past 42 again. Maybe we've got the answer to life, the universe, and everything. First of all, let's say some people definitely have had the answer to profits, the universe, and everything. Welcome to the 20% Club. In an overall terrific results season for exchanges and market infrastructure providers, Q1 has seen a particularly noticeable 20+% club of winners, including SIBO, ICE, and NASDAQ. All-weather results, thanks to all-weather excellence of management. Well done to all that have had astounding results this month and this quarter. And in fact, not just those three, but also some incredible off-the-wall smaller exchanges. DFM up 171%, Nigeria soaring, Nairobi doing very well. Absolutely superb results. At the same time, thank you to Exchange Parish elder statesman Les Hosking, the former boss of the Sydney Futures Exchange, who wrote a perfect AFR letter, that's the Australian Financial Review, all about the ASX, that's the Australian Stock Exchange Group's many failures. Hopefully a buyer for FEX Global will inject further competition in Australia. Meanwhile, as the graphic shows, CZ went from 4 FUD to 4-month FUD. Formerly the boss of Binance, he can count himself a very lucky man. CZ is receiving only 4 months in jail, much less than the US government were expecting. They were seeking 3 years, and in fact he'd even agreed he wouldn't appeal anything up to 18 months. That's going to be a 4-month sentence beginning soon for a catalogue of crypto crimes. Beyond the world of crypto, here we have a very interesting new flywheel. There's a great paper out today, a white paper from the European Banking Federation, the European Funds and Asset Management Association, AFAMA, and FESI, the Federation of European Securities Exchanges, all beautifully collated by Oliver Wyman. It's a new flywheel for EU markets. It's seeking to level up that, well, huge growth problem. What have we had over the last 15 years? 9% growth in the European Union, 86% growth of GDP in the United States during the course of the last 15 years. Some of the stats in this report are eye-popping. The US has 622% of GDP in liquid assets available to invest in the stock market. The leading European Union nations, i.e. France, Italy, Germany, Spain, the largest economies, have barely 200 to 300%, less than half. No wonder US markets represent 157% of their appreciably higher GDP compared to a rather 66% in the EU. It's all to play for, incidentally, though. Don't give up hope yet. If the European Union could level up to US levels, that would mean an additional 35 billion euros, so $40 billion. Sorry, $40 trillion, 35 trillion euros of capital in Germany, Italy, and Spain alone. Bear in mind, at the end of 2022, the entire equity market capitalization of the whole European Union's 27 markets was 13 trillion euros, barely $15 trillion. All the above stories have been covered in Exchange Invest during the course of the past week, apart from the proposed flywheel approach, which will be our lead story in Exchange Invest tomorrow. There's still time to subscribe, ladies and gentlemen. There's even a 7-day free trial. If you get over to exchangeinvest.com right now, you can catch up on what we're going to be talking about in the wonderful world of exchanges at all points in time. Today, ladies and gentlemen, really exciting show. We are going to be talking about what I think is the most exciting alternative market system in the United States of America, indeed in the world right now. Blue Ocean presents a new market tide, and we're here with their CEO, Brian Hyndman. Brian, the president and CEO of Blue Ocean Technologies, was the SVP of Global Information Services for the NASDAQ OMX Group previously. Prior to that, he'd served as SVP of Transaction Services, responsible for managing operations of NASDAQ's US equity trading platforms. Before NASDAQ, he was the president of BRUT, an ECN that was eventually sold to NASDAQ in 2004. Suffice it to say, I'm going to let Brian speak for himself rather than going through his incredible CV in markets, because we're going to hear much more of that starting now. Brian, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here. Where in the world are you today?
Patrick, first of all, thanks for having me today. And I'm going to try to match your energy. I love it. I'm down in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. So down in the Sunshine State down here, our headquarters for Blue Ocean Technologies is in West Palm Beach.
That's marvelous. So you're forming part of this very, very exciting bulwark of financial center that's growing out of the Miami Palm Beach area. Obviously, I know there was a very exciting NYSE podcast recently where they were talking to Ken Griffin, and of course he's invested in, well, good grief, so much real estate that I think he's bought quite a significant square footage of Florida so far. Very interesting times to be down there. What drove the move to come to West Palm Beach for Blue Ocean?
Yeah, so I made the move pre-COVID. So back in 2015, I left New York City, moved down here for a variety of reasons. For one, there's no state tax, warm weather, golf capital of the world. But Blue Ocean, at the beginning, we were all in disparate locations. Some people in New Jersey, New York, West Coast, Charlotte, Chicago. But now we have a beachhead down here where we primarily work from home, but also we like to get together a few times a week and get in the office and grow the business together as a team, and doing it down in South Florida, which is it was the right decision, because I was here, because our sales team is here, our operations team, and of course the price is right given no state tax.
Yeah, given the state tax, it's certainly very, very attractive. And you really were an early adopter coming in 2015, given the fact that it's only been in the course of the last sort of 3-4 years during COVID that we had this sudden incredible exodus from New York and other parts that has driven to Florida. Fascinating place to be, very dynamic, great for airports as well, of course, because you've got West Palm Beach itself, you've got Fort Lauderdale not far away, even Miami Airport's not that much of a drive, particularly for the United States of America. So you've got very, very good connectivity. I speak to somebody who was through Miami Airport just a couple of days ago on my way to Grand Turk here in the Turks and Caicos Islands. So, Brian, tell me, where did it all begin? How did you get into financial markets?
So I began in the financial markets way back in 1992, 1993, where I started out with a company called National Discount Brokers. They were really pioneering touch-tone trading. So they were, well before Robinhood, getting into it. They were, instead of getting on the computer and placing trades like we do today, they did it over the touch-tone telephone. So we were part of that process, and then we ended up selling out a few years later. And that's when I started at BRUT. So BRUT was really transformational, I think, for the industry. The ECNs all were, the Island ECN, Archipelago, BRUT. We were all kind of changing the way that securities were traded. For the most part, NASDAQ was electronic, but the New York Stock Exchange and other exchanges were floor-based manual markets. And we brought into play really fixed technology, which was new at the time. And automated trading and high-frequency trading started to begin in 1999, 2000. And we started to compete very, very hard against the incumbent exchanges. Way back then, where you were listed was where you were traded. So if you listed on NASDAQ, like Microsoft, all your shares were traded on NASDAQ. And if you listed on the New York Stock Exchange, like IBM, all your shares were traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Well, we got into the business and kind of upset that. And at BRUT, we started to trade NYSE listed securities, on our ECN when I came to NASDAQ. And before you knew it, we were doing more business in NYSE listed securities than the floor of the stock exchange was doing. So we really transformed the way shares were traded. Now on any given day, the market share is broken up, call it a third with CBOE and NASDAQ and the New York. And just because you're listed on NASDAQ doesn't mean that you trade there. So we ended up selling BRUT to NASDAQ and ended up running their U.S. exchange business, which included the Philadelphia Stock Exchange, the Boston Stock Exchange, the integration of BRUT and INET when we had those acquisitions. And then I ended up running their global data business, which was interesting. The data business was, when I got there, $250 million in revenue. When I left, it was $550 million with an 80% margin. And it's grown dramatically over the years that I haven't been there since I left in 2015. But the data is a real interesting component for the exchanges. I then got into the crypto space for a little bit with Paxos, which is a great company doing wonderful things with the stablecoin world, where they're taking dollars and making them digital, so you can move money quicker. So think about, if you not wanted to move money around the world today, you have to go through all these international banking laws and procedures and money, and it could take a couple of days to move money around the world. But with a stable coin, you could move $1 in seconds on the Ethereum network. So they give you a digital dollar if you give them a paper dollar, and then you can move it around the world in seconds, which is really incredible. So that's the future of where I think that business is going, is the stable coin. But then more excitingly, I got involved with Blue Ocean back in late 2020. And, these guys that started the company had a vision to kind of trade US stocks overnight. And we took that vision one step further. We're still trading US stocks overnight. But when I first got there, we thought it was going to be US traders that wanted to trade, after the post-market session, before the pre-market, and episodic events, if there's news on a company. And there still is some truth to that. And we see some business in the States on the edges there. But it's really for the global investor that wants to manage their risk real time. And it's for the Asian investor that wants to trade US stocks during their daytime hours. So 75% of our business comes from Asia Pac, because those folks want to trade the Microsofts, the NVIDIAs, the Teslas real time when it's their daytime hours.
Yeah, and I mean, it's amazing because you open at, remind me, am I right in thinking 10 o'clock in the evening, something like that, Eastern time?
We actually open up 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock, my apologies.
So 8 to 4.
8 to 4. So you've got a decent 8-hour day, and that's actually very good for you because you're just about breakfast time in much of Southeast Asia, and you pretty much overlap then really quite elegantly dovetail, thinking off the top of my head, with Tokyo and also Korea. So those are two quite good markets, obviously, to start with. So, I mean, let's take a step back here. I mean, you build this after hours market. It's ready to go. In recent times, I've noticed, I mean, you really seem to have had quite a volume explosion. Has that been an increasing realization in Asia of just how accessible American stocks are thanks to Blue Ocean?
Yeah, it was really, an educational process throughout the past, call it 15 to 18 months. And, it really started in South Korea, where we built a beachhead, and we have over 20 brokers trading from South Korea, where they now can take their phones and trade US stocks real time, and can trade in and out, where in the past they had to put in a limit order and then go to sleep and hope it got executed, or buy a mutual fund. Now they could actively trade US stocks during their daytime hours. Again, the beachhead started in South Korea. We got some business coming out of Hong Kong. The Tokyo Stock Exchange made an investment in Blue Ocean. We have business coming out of Tokyo, Singapore, and now we're making some inroads into the Australian market.
Fantastic. And just so that everybody understands, you are a US ATS, so you're regulated under the SEC rules with FINRA et al. And then you've got a network of brokers who link to you in order to access your marketplace. Is that right?
That's correct. So we're a US, we're not an exchange, we're an alternative trading system regulated by the SEC and FINRA. We could only interface with US broker-dealers. So if there's a foreign broker that wants to come in to Blue Ocean, they'd have to come in through a relationship that they have with a U.S. broker-dealer. And we have, call it like 40, 45 brokers trading on the platform, either directly as subscribers or coming in through a U.S. registered broker-dealer.
But in any case, I mean, that makes sense, presumably, for the foreign broker dealers, because they have to be effectively linked into the US and able to access the DTCC for settlement, etc. So they're more than likely going to need a counterparty in the US to do that, and therefore they will be regulated in that sense.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, this is so interesting because essentially you found a pool of liquidity that nobody was talking about. I don't think anybody was looking for. I don't think they'd even sent the sort of Indiana Jones of bourses out there to try and find this remarkable, sudden clearing in the jungle there was this huge amount of Asian liquidity. Is it simply the access that is of interest to the the investors in Asia, or is it the fact that they've always wanted to be getting to the American market, but it was simply cumbersome to do through local alternatives?
I think it was cumbersome. And I think the US exchanges wanted to do it years ago. When I was at NASDAQ, we pitched the CEO, Bob Greifeld, that we should, be trading 24 hours a day. And we went out and spoke to our customers in the US, and most of them at that time, I know this was 2013-ish, they said, listen, we just want to go home at 5 o'clock. We don't want to extend the day anymore. That's it. We want to go home. We were speaking to the wrong people, because when you speak to the folks on the other side of the world, now there's 330 million people in the US, but there's billions of people over in Asia Pac. They want to have access during their daytime hours. That's who you need to speak to. And while we're doing 40, 50 million shares a night right now, the folks in South Korea, their numbers, not mine, they think it could be billions of shares traded overnight during this 8-hour period.
Yes, it's quite spectacular. I mean, the volume numbers you've been doing recently, and that's really what got me very interested, because I'd paid attention to your story, but really growth has been quite exponential in recent times. And you're doing, actually, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Remind us, roughly what percentage have you been doing of the overall US market in recent times?
I mean, we're not quite at 1%, but, the volume has been, as you said, exponential growth throughout 2023 into 2024. And because of that growth, we need to make some changes on the technology. So we want to get more industrial grade so we could handle the additional flow. If these folks in South Korea are remotely right, and it's, a billion or 2 billion additional shares that could be added to the US equity pie that's currently around 10 to 12 billion shares, that's real volume. And we need to be able to handle it from a market data perspective, from a matching engine perspective. Right now, it's all 95% retail flow. But if you start to get high frequency customers and more market makers quoting, we need to make sure that we have the right technology. And we're partnering with MEMX. MEMX runs an equity exchange and an options exchange, and we're partnering with them on the technology side. A couple of guys that started MEMX over there, Tom Fay, Dominic Paniscotti, they used to work at NASDAQ. They understand the space well, the technology space, and we look forward to making that conversion over the next, call it 60 days or so.
That's very exciting, because obviously MEMX itself is a competitor within the US domestic market, and you're one of their first technology customers. I presume it makes great sense for you, because that's what they've been built to do, is trade US equities. So therefore, it's only the question of you extending your interface further overseas, and it gives you more industrial quantity. But actually, I'm just pausing for a second to have a slightly mind-blowing moment. The idea that in the heavily institutionalized, biggest stock market in the world of the United States of America, you can get up to something like close to 1% of the total volume of the market while trading in the middle of the night, as pretty much the United States of America sleeps, and with essentially so far really only retail business. That strikes me as absolutely staggering.
Yeah, it's retail business. We're starting to get some interest from the buy side, right? So the buy side, if they don't get an order done during the core market session, they'll put it in the post-market session. But they're looking to come to Blue Ocean to soak up some additional liquidity if they have orders that weren't filled during, the core market hours. I would say, like, the most interesting stat that I can throw out here is that the amount of stocks we trade on any given night is staggering. I would have thought it was maybe the meme stocks, maybe some low price stocks, NASDAQ 100, Teslas, NVIDIA, Microsoft. On any given night, we're trading, last month over 4,500 different stocks. So it's really, really wide, and the demand comes from all over for all different types of companies.
That is staggering. And actually, that was going to be my next question. So thank you for preempting me, because 4,500 names, and that's from the, very, very rich and significant number of NMS regulated listed stocks in the United States of America. But nonetheless, that's an incredible breadth of interest. Have you any idea how people are coming to the idea of investing? Because, let's put it this way, by the time you get to the 4,000th or 4,500th biggest stock in America, it's certainly not necessarily going to be a household name. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, we have millions of end customers, right? So, if you think about who our customers are, it's the Robin Hoods, the Interactive brokers, the Futus of the world, and all these customers, all these brokers have end customers in the millions. So these people come far and wide, and they have their own ideas and have their own reasons to manage their risk real time or to trade certain stocks. So, it's not a very small universe. It's a wide, vast universe. And, the more I think about it, I shouldn't be surprised that it's 4,500 different symbols on any given night. But I wasn't really thinking about that a couple of years ago. I thought it would have been, a lot smaller number.
Sorry, I'm just having a slight technical moment there. And yeah, it's incredible. I mean, it is really, really, it amazes me because, for so long, I suppose the zeitgeist has been, oh, everybody who's outside of the United States of America, what do they want? Tesla or Apple or whatever is popular. As you say, NVIDIA, which has been really in vogue in recent months with the AI boom, etc. It's just incredible because certainly it also shows the incredible way that not just the raw data, but the overall breadth of understanding of the US market has increased thanks to the internet. That people clearly know what are these 4,000. I'm not suggesting every user knows every one of them, but there are people in, there are people in Busan or people in Osaka who are sitting there going, what I really, really need today is some stock in whatever this is, this mid-cap mining company or mid-cap banking stock or something like that. It's fascinating as a play on how our market information has globalized. And you hit on something very interesting there. So you're getting interest now, presumably then you're saying from kind of market maker, high frequency trader, and also the buy side community, because until now you've essentially just been sitting there opening up and waiting for people to match their orders through your wonderful offices without actually having a market making system per se.
Well, not so true, right? So we do have a couple of key market makers on the platform since the early days. So we have firms like Jane Street and Virtu, household names in the U.S. broker-dealer business. They're making two-sided markets on the platform. On any given night, they probably make a market in 7,000 or 8,000 different stocks on the platform.
Wow, that's pretty impressive as well that they're doing that. As a matter of interest, are there market makers, and I don't want you to give away sort of private information or name the companies, but are the market makers themselves actually people who are coming in and doing a night shift in the US, or is it a book that's being passed to one of their offices in Asia or something like that?
For the most part, it's they have offices out in Asia, in Singapore and Hong Kong, and it's their remote offices that are serving the blue ocean market. Yeah.
That's really, really fascinating altogether. So you've got guys on the ground now. They're pounding the pavement, I do believe, certainly in Japan and South Korea rather assiduously. You mentioned that you're looking at Australia. It strikes me that in a several billion person environment that's cut across a very, very disparate geography of Southeast Asia, it must be quite difficult knowing how you prioritize going after those particular customers.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's the other side of the world, right? There's some language barriers out there. It makes it a little more difficult. We do have some feet on the street out there in South Korea and in Tokyo, and they speak multiple languages, so that helps. But yeah, we also go out and work with our partners. So, like for instance, Strive Wealth, we made an announcement with them. I think it was back in February, and they're a great partner, and they're located in, disparate parts of the world, EMEA, Asia Pac, LATAM, US. So we kind of leverage the reach of our US subscribers and partners to get into some of these geographical regions.
And that actually raises, a very interesting question, because, of course, it's not just about necessarily Southeast Asia during those hours. There's a large amount of the rest of Asia and other parts all the way into the Middle East that are already up and awake and trading and getting their first couple of coffees in during the course of the day, long before 4 a.m. in New York time. So it just strikes me as being the most incredible opportunity for growth. And to muse on that, actually, I'm going to let you have a rest for a moment, Brian, because you've been answering these questions so brilliantly. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a spectacular audience today. If you would like to ask Brian a question, please go right ahead and use the next minute or two to type something in, whatever platform you're watching us on today. We're discussing this very, very interesting, a new market tide, blue ocean. Also, give us a bit of love. AI is vitally important, as we all know. Nowadays, the bots control who sees this content. So therefore, the more love you give us, the more opportunity we have to take the message to the outside world about what I just think is the most exciting alternative trading system on the planet, going all the way from the USA to serving particularly Southeast Asia. And talking about Southeast Asia, we've been running recently, and I appreciate that in the United States of America, certain members of the political classes may not be pleased to hear this, a lot of short videos. Well, we do them on YouTube, so at least that's not so bad, on Facebook and LinkedIn. They also happen to turn up on TikTok, because that's vitally important for our marketplace in Asia, no matter what the wondrous polity of the United States of America may decide in the future. And to give you a bit of a flavor, well, here's a video we made earlier talking about China. Enjoy the next minute. Meanwhile, in Big World, here's a fun fact about the cinema. In 1930 in the USA, despite or perhaps because of the recession, 65% of Americans went to the cinema weekly. By 2023, 4% of Americans were going to the cinema regularly on a weekly basis. Ari's research team over at Exchange Invest have been unable to corroborate this statistic, but my guess is about 65% of all Americans fall asleep watching Netflix or HBO every week of the year. For more in Big World, like or follow. Aha, so that was a tease then, ladies and gentlemen. I thought we were going to be talking about China, but actually we're going to talk about American cinema going. So you'll just have to go to our short video stream on YouTube, LinkedIn, or indeed TikTok if you're allowed to watch these things, and catch up with our China videos there. You can also catch us on Instagram. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, you can subscribe to Exchange Invest, the bulletin of the bourse business. All we talk about is markets, how much we love them, the best markets in the world, the exciting markets that are being developed, the politics, the wonderment of what goes on. Go to exchangeinvest.com, please, and sign yourself up for a 7-day free trial. You'll understand why we're the water cooler of the bourse business and why the biggest markets in the world read us daily for our information and pith about what goes on in the bourse business. Now, moving back to our conversation with Brian. So, Brian, you mentioned earlier how you were responsible for data at NASDAQ laterally in your career, and obviously that was a huge thing. How have you been approaching data from the perspective of Blue Ocean?
Yeah, it's a great question. And data, super important in the exchange and in the ATS world, right? It's the information that traders need to make trading decisions, right? So we start out, we give them, what's the closing price from the primary markets. We use a 725 reference price, 730 reference price, and we begin to make the market makers begin to make two-sided markets based off that 730 reference price. What we do is distribute that data out around the globe, right? So we do it individually. If someone wants to take our own proprietary data feed and consume it and take it into their handheld device or whatever their trading application is. But then we also leverage partners like ICE, Refinitiv, Active, Yonhap, Iris, and we have global redistributors that take our data and put it on desktops, put it into data feeds for the end customers to kind of consume however they want it, whether that's using eyeballs or whether that's through a non-display data feed into their trading application. Our data is distributed globally around the world, and that's one of the reasons why we're moving to MEMX, right? So we can do this better in a more efficient fashion going forward. And we also monetize the data, right? So it's one of the products that we sell to our end customers so they can manage their risk real time.
So that's very interesting because therefore, the idea that you can have this standalone feed is obviously fantastic, particularly for those Asian retail investors, a lot of whom trade off their mobile phones all day long, their cell phones. It's got to be a great feed for them because then they don't have to worry about actually taking some US data feed at an inordinate cost in order to find out what happened while they were asleep. They can actually sit there and look at what's going through your data feed in front of their eyes on the platform, and gives them a very good idea of what they actually may be able to do or not do.
It gives them the ability to make decisions real time and leg into a stock, leg out of a stock, manage risk real time. Like if a door flies off a Boeing plane and somebody wants to go ahead and trade, on Sunday night, they're going to have the data at their fingertips to go ahead and manage that risk real time.
And I'm delighted to say that after encountering several Boeing planes at the weekend, all the doors stayed on, which was a joyous occasion altogether. The doors seem to have stopped falling off. It's the whistleblowers seem to be in danger these days. But anyway, let's not get into that. Very, very interesting discussion altogether about these sort of things. Now, let me hit one other question, which really fascinates me, because obviously, for all those of us like me who are huge petrol heads, then we associate Memorial Day with not just the opportunity to think about the great history of the United States of America and its many veterans, but also the Indy 500. I do believe this year's Indy 500 is going to be watched by approximately nobody who works in the stock market business, because, of course, the day after the holiday, we're all going to T+1. What do you think the ramifications of T+1 settlement are going to be for Blue Ocean, Brian?
Yeah, I get asked that question quite a bit from reporters. They understand T+1, right? It's simple. Trades used to settle trade plus 2 days. Now it's going to be trade plus one. It doesn't really affect our world at Blue Ocean. Quite frankly, it'll be nice to see us go to real time, clearance and settlement at some point in the future. Not sure when we get there and what kind of technology we'll need to do that. But to get to a T+1 world, gosh, I want to say it was T7, then it was at least T5 when I started out.
Yeah.
And, here we are going to T+1. It doesn't really matter for Blue Ocean. We are working with the U.S. Clearinghouse, DTCC, and SEC, National Securities Clearing Corporation, to figure out how they can start to modernize their technology and move to a 24/5 clearing cycle to work with firms more efficiently like Blue Ocean, and where we can clear and settle, overnight rather than waiting to batch that up and send it to them at 4:05 in the morning. So T+1, to give you the straight answer, doesn't really affect Blue Ocean. We're going to function the same way that we do today, but we are eager to work with the industry and NSCC in particular to kind of lengthen their hours of operation so we can clear and settle more real time rather than batching that and sending it to them at 4:05.
That's a very interesting answer. I would actually have to say, for the first time today, I'm close to slightly disagreeing with you, but I'm going to disagree with you from the optimistic standpoint, because it strikes me, I wrote a paper for Vermiculus just a few months ago, which is very interesting. You can download that via Exchange Investor, via the Vermiculus website, actually, and we were talking about T+1. It seems to me T+1, in one sense, is a godsend, because if I'm in Asia right now and I put orders into the US marketplace during the US trading day, I have a very, very narrow banking window to get myself settled. Whereas when I come to the world post Memorial Day, if I put my order into Blue Ocean, if I've got this right, do please contradict me if I'm wrong, I'm going to trade in the middle of my night when my bank is open. So I'm going to be able to give them instructions if I need to move anything I've got to do. My clearing broker is going to be on top of it and ready to do that. They're going to then batch that at whatever time it's going to be, 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning US time, to be ready for basically the tape of the next morning, as it were, if we're thinking back into US time. Sorry, I'm juxtaposing back and forward around the world here, ladies and gentlemen. So therefore, at the market open in New York, essentially everything prints instantaneously off the ATSs, and then I have a lovely T+1 settlement. So if I'm sitting in Asia, I kind of get T+1 and a bit, if not T+2, in terms of what I can actually interact with. And I can sleep easily because I've already left all my banking instructions, rather than having a stressed late night worry where there's very, very little overlap in my US banking if I'm trading directly onto one of the US exchanges or ATSs during US trading hours.
Yeah, I think you got that right. And it's a lot of details, I think, for the end consumer, but you obviously understand it very well. Keep in mind that when you're trading on Blue Ocean at 8 o'clock at night, that's really next day, right? So that's the next day trading. That's when the day the following day starts at 8 o'clock Eastern time, and everything will be submitted to NSCC the following day for the next day. And same thing with trade reporting. There's no real-time trade reporting. Hopefully NYSE and NASDAQ get there at some point in time, but we batch it all up and send it over at 8 o'clock in the morning to the NYSE trade reporting facility.
That's very, very interesting. We've got a couple of fantastic questions have already come through in the last few minutes. I'm going to ask those to you in just a moment, Brian. But first of all, I want to jump to our book of the week. As you know, ladies and gentlemen, EI Weekend, which is a completely free product where we talk about the macro world in general, etc. We always pick a book of the week. This week, we've picked something from one of our former IPO-VID guests, Rainer Zittelmann. He's talking about Unbreakable Spirit. This is the profiles of 20-something different people in the world who all essentially achieved incredible things despite some form of disability or mega setback in their life. Rising Above All Odds is the subtitle to this book. It's a really, truly inspiring read. And it brings together all sorts of people from household names, such as indeed, well, people like Ludwig von Beethoven, who we all recall went deaf during the course of the peak of his conducting ability. But it's a really, really great read. Go get that right now. You can pick it up on Amazon and all the usual stores. And don't forget, if you are not subscribed already, subscribe to the EI Weekend for free. Ideally, subscribe to EI Daily and pay for some money to us after a 7-day free trial, because therefore we can keep making fabulous videos like this. So let's jump to the questions, Brian. First up, we've got a super question coming from himself, an IPO-VID veteran, previously Jeff Cutler, amongst other places at GARP, the Global Association of Risk Professionals, and also the TAB Forum. Hi, Jeff. Hi, gentlemen. Can Brian comment about the durability of the ATS model? Will Blue Ocean be riding that indefinitely into the future?
Well, Jeff, thanks for the question. It's a good one. And we've chosen to take the ATS path because it makes us more nimble, right? Once you become an exchange, there's a lot more rules, a lot more regulation. Not that we're not regulated, but there's just a lot more hoops to jump through. And there's some benefits that come along with becoming an exchange, where you can buy into the Securities Information Processor, SIP. And if you're doing business, during the core market hours, pre and the post, you can share in the market data revenue, roughly $500 million in tape revenue that's shared almost on a pro rata basis. Complicated formula. To all the exchanges, right, out of this pool. The ATS model, we don't have that revenue pool to dig into, but we do have the ability to be nimble, the ability to be flexible, and we think that that's going to keep us moving, gaining share, and growing. Certainly at some point in the future, if we needed to become an exchange, we could. That's not on our radar right now. We're happy working with the ATS, working with the SEC on growing our ATS model, and working with FINRA on that model. And we think the ATS model can survive for years to come. There's a variety of other ATSs out there that have been added for a while. There's roughly 30 ATSs. We think Blue Ocean can ride that ATS model into the future.
Very interesting indeed. Thank you very, very much. And of course, I mean, one of the things that I think makes the US market so dynamic, thank you, Jeff Cutler, for that question, is just the sheer size of the US business. Because you look at the idea of a marketplace that's doing, as you say, whatever, 10, 11, 12 billion shares a day. That's a surreal amount of liquidity and transactions taking place every day, even if you compare it to somewhere like the entirety of the European Union stock markets, or any major markets in isolation, such as London or Tokyo, etc. It's quite fascinating, the success of that.
There's a lot of hands in that pie, right? There's 16 exchange licenses, 30 ATSs, a variety of brokers that internalize and match their own buyers and sellers together and put it up on the tape. So there's a lot of liquidity, but a lot of people involved, and a lot of hands in the cookie jar there.
That's true. But at the same time, I mean, what is very exciting is if you are a nimble and well-managed organization and you can get yourself to something like 1% of the overall market as an ATS, it is not impossible to believe that you can be profitable. Whereas in, say, Europe, if you get yourself to several percent, you can still be struggling for profitability simply because there is so much less of a turnover. And obviously, if you hit sort of 5% or so, a lot of ATSs can really start to be hugely cash generative without having to scale up enormously.
No, that's right. Without getting into the financial details, this business scales very, very nicely. We have 15 people. We have our technology expense. We have our PR and marketing. After that, there's really a small variable expense that we have. I always tell the board that once we hit to break even, every new dollar that comes in, 90 cents goes to the bottom line. So as you said, it scales up very nicely, and you don't have to do a billion shares a night to get there.
Yeah, I mean, that's such an interesting and nice part of the business, and that's also why I think the exchange model is so exciting, and why we're so excited about the prospects of this business, particularly when, without any disrespect to Blue Ocean, I mean, you went out and you found suddenly this rich pool, this rich seam of liquidity you've mined that nobody even thought existed in the first place, which I think is absolutely sensational altogether. So let me jump. We've got two questions lined up. We've got Rod Label. Hey, Rod, great to see you this evening. Thank you very much for joining us. How does Blue Ocean's spread and liquidity compare to market hour spreads and liquidity on the primary exchanges? Great question.
Really, really good question, Rob. We get it all the time from our customers, and we'll send them our data and they can kind of parse through it and figure out what's important to them. Blue Ocean spread and liquidity, let's focus on spreads, kind of mimics where the pre and the post is, right? And sometimes, depending on the stock, right, we trade 4,500 different stocks on any given night. The NASDAQ 100, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Tesla, they'll be at a penny spread. But then obviously it gets wider and it kind of looks like the pre and post market. But I would say that our spreads in liquidity are positive. Customers aren't concerned about it. We have a competing market making model, right, where we have multiple market makers. Not that we give them incentives to compete, but they're out there kind of posting bids and offers and tightening up those spreads. So the spreads look, I would say, like the pre and the post, if not maybe a little bit better.
Fascinating altogether. Thank you very, very much, Rod, for that question. I think that's a really, really good question. I think it's a very, very important one. And actually, that's mind-numbing again. I've got to say, the idea that you can, at any stage, manage to get penny spreads up in the middle of the night on even the largest stocks in America. So, I mean, what's interesting with that is obviously then you become, even at a slightly wider spread for smaller stocks, etc., you're incredibly competitive compared to, say, broker-dealer driven products or spread betting type CFD type products in terms of the actual entry and exit costs, presumably because essentially your costs are just mimicking what are the US equity transaction costs, give or take.
It's a very transparent market, right? So our data is not in the SIP, but our data feed is lit for anybody that's looking at our data feed. So they'll see all the bids, all the offers. If they want to move up to the inside market, they just move it up. They know where the prices are at, and they can move their bids up and offers up and tighten that spread to make sure that they're driving the inside and they're going to get the next execution. So we're not lit from an exchange standpoint where we're in the securities information processor or the SIP feed, but anybody that's looking at our data feed, either proprietarily or through one of the redistributors that I mentioned earlier, you can see all the bids and offers in the book.
Very interesting. Thank you very, very much for that question, Rob Label, and fascinating discussion altogether. So now we come to a question from Christian P. I'm sorry, Christian, I don't know what your surname is. It's just coming up as Christian P on my screen. Hello all. Hello, Christian. Can Brian comment? Maybe he can, maybe he can't, on how close competitors are to creating their own 24 hours trading system, if there are any at all?
Yeah, listen, right now we're the only ATS out there from 8 o'clock at night to 4 in the morning, trading national market system stocks, clearing, settling, trade reporting, dealing with corporate actions. We blazed the path on this, and we're the only ATS doing that today. Now, will another ATS get involved? Will an exchange get involved? At some point, if we truly believe that the market here is 24 hours a day by 5 days a week, we're going to have a competitor. All right. NASDAQ said that they're focused on their recent acquisition. They're not getting into it. NYSE put out a questionnaire to kind of poll its customers. Should they get into it? It'll be interesting to see what kind of response they get. There's some upstarts that have been at it and trying to file to become an exchange and having fits and starts with no success. With that being said, I think a competitor is, I always say to the board, 12 to 18 months away. I still think it's 12 to 18 months away. Someone's going to come. It's just going to validate what we're doing. And I think the size of the overall pie is just going to get bigger. So, if the folks in South Korea are correct and there's going to be 1 billion or 2 billion shares traded in the overnight, there's room for a couple of players out there.
Yes, it strikes me a little bit like the retail investor boom amongst the Forex brokers and CFD brokers in Eastern Europe, where essentially it became a huge land grab, and some people went to Poland, some people went to Russia, some people went other places, and there's probably a market in there where you're not going to be able to manage to capture a particular market. But on the other hand, if you can tie up South Korea, Japan, and say Australia, to name but 3, that's going to make you a mega player in the first place, regardless of whatever happens in any of the other territories. I mean, the opportunity just seems to be immense, because what have you got? We're looking at easily a catchment area of 2.5 to more 3 billion people in your addressable market, just that are up in their day between 0800 and 4 a.m. or 2000 and 4 a.m. in the US overnight, let alone the people who are partially up in that course of time, like say, for example, the Middle East?
Yeah, the amount of the size of the opportunity is really, really big. You mentioned Tokyo and Hong Kong and South Korea and all the markets that we're into and getting into with Australia. I failed to mention earlier that we're also we now have a flag in the Middle East with GTN. So there was interest coming out of the Middle East, and there appears to be some interest coming out of India also. So the expansion is also, we're looking to get into those areas in addition to the other markets that I mentioned.
Wow, you just rattled off another 1.4 billion people in India alone there before we even got to the roughly billion people that you can find in and around the Middle East. So we're about 4.3 billion, I think, bid at the moment, something like that in your addressable market that you're actually attacking. I mean, that's just absolutely sensational numbers altogether. So, I mean, just let's take a sidestep, because I'm surprised actually we haven't had that question so far. You mentioned briefly to us, and of course those of you who've been watching this show regularly recently will realize that of course Thomas J. Caldwell was our esteemed guest just a few weeks ago, and he was particularly pumped and excited about this investment he has in Blue Ocean. Tell us a little bit about who are backing you at the moment, and how you came about getting that money, and therefore what it's propelling for you forward.
Yeah, so originally we went north of the border to Urbana Corporation and Mr. Caldwell. Mr. Caldwell was very familiar with the U.S. exchange business, as he was investing in many of the exchanges, in particular the New York Stock Exchange, around the turn of the century when they were demutualizing. So he understood the space very, very well. He was happy to make an investment early on in 2021. After Urbana, we got Robinhood. And as you know from their advertising, this is very near and dear to their heart, where they're offering overnight and 24-hour trading around the globe and making inroads into the European market. And then more recently, we had the Tokyo Stock Exchange. They had the same vision as the folks in South Korea, where they wanted to offer their customers, or 82 brokers, access to trade U.S. stocks during their daytime hours. So they bought a 5% stake back in September, and they're in the process of helping us onboard some key Japanese brokers onto the Blue Ocean platform.
That's absolutely fabulous. And of course, the timing couldn't be better, because finally equities seem to have come back around as a cycle in Japan. And therefore, I think there's a great deal more interest in terms of what's going on. A little bit difficult, of course, because all those poor people who start out in Japanese yen. Isn't it an interesting life cycle over the course of our careers? I mean, we can talk about these poor people in Japan because of the weakness of the yen. I can remember the times when the yen was utterly dominant. We were talking quite the opposite way around. But nonetheless, very, very exciting to have Tokyo Stock Exchange backing you, pushing that forward. Urbana, a great name given their pioneering history of investing in many superb for-profit exchange situations very, very well. And of course, they're still holders of, well, various of the world's finest names to this day, Intercontinental Exchange and CBOE, to name but two, as well as the Canadian Securities Exchange, whose CEO, Richard Caldwell, was also on our show a number of months ago. Fascinating altogether. Very interesting to have Robinhood backed up in that mix as well. Must make for a very, very lively series of discussions when you're getting all your shareholders into the same room, as they obviously look ahead, and they're all growing and interested in growing the pie. So therefore, I mean, we've only got about 12 minutes left at the moment, Brian. What do you think are the next steps? I mean, you've mentioned the fact that you're prioritizing, obviously, getting everything over onto the MEMX technology. That's coming up within the next 60, 100 days, which is going to be very exciting. Where do you think Blue Ocean goes in its near-term steps to further develop?
Yeah, when I think about where are we going to go over the course of the next 12 to 18 months, right? So the MEMX transition, we have to get it right. We are laser focused on transitioning from our current provider over to MEMX, call it over the next 60 to 70 days, and we'll get that done. Two is continuing to grow the liquidity. As I said, we're doing 40, 50 million shares on any given night. We need to continue to grow and penetrate into different regions of the world. We did a great job in South Korea. We're doing a good job in Tokyo, Hong Kong, Singapore. We need to really penetrate with the help of our partners, like Drive Wealth and others, getting into the Australian market. And then, right now we're 8 hours of the clock, 8 o'clock at night, 4 in the morning. The folks out in Asia Pac would like to see us expand those hours and cover the pre and the post. So go 17 and a half hours at the clock. Not sure we're there yet on it, but we're going to look and make sure that that's exactly what they want. And if so, our technology provider, MEMX, can help us get there. So we'll continue to grow the amount of securities we trade on any given night. We'll build the liquidity getting into different geographical regions. And then we'll see if we need to go 17 and a half hours at the clock to kind of keep the trading hours of operation expanded and open more so they can manage their risk, real time.
That's absolutely fascinating altogether. And how does that look for you in terms of roughly scaling the business? Because you mentioned, I think you're like 15 people at the moment. Do you have to scale the number of people vastly in order to reach sort of 17 hours of trading?
We don't. I mean, right now we can quadruple our business. We wouldn't have to add any additional heads, right? So it's a very scalable business from where we are right now. If you expand the hours of operation, yes, we would have to add a few support people to kind of stretch out the hours to be able to handle, the pre and the post hours, but nothing material. I would say if we had to add another 3 people, that would be a lot.
Right. And I mean, essentially, the sort of people you've got to add are simply people that have got to be there during those courses, those trading hours. You've always got to have somebody doing surveillance at all points in time, et cetera, et cetera. That was always the biggest shock for me in going into the cash equity market from the infrastructure side was when I was a director of LiquidNet and discovering we had like 3.5 people at that stage doing market surveillance simply because somebody had to sit there all day long and watch the screen, which is obviously one area of expense you still can't avoid. And the good folks in NASDAQ, as you know so well, and nicely, they get away with it because they can get like 50 people can watch about 50,000 names of options, this, that, and the other, whereas everybody else has to have one person, even if you've only got one name trading. It's quite an interesting situation. So look, it's really, really fascinating to see your growth, to hear what's happening. I mean, we've only started scratching the surface. Do you think as an ATS that there's a future for you beyond simply cash equities, or is it just too early to talk about that yet?
Listen, I like to make sure that we're executing on the plan that we laid out to the board and to our investors, and that's trading U.S. equities overnight from 8 o'clock at night, 4 in the morning, maybe expanding the hours. With that being said, we see demand from Asian retail to trade U.S. options overnight. We're not getting into that business anytime soon. But I think, given Blue Ocean's space in the market, I think there's an opportunity for a U.S. options exchange to begin to trade their products overnight and to use Blue Ocean to kind of, lay off that business.
Right. That's certainly a very, very exciting opportunity. And obviously, I mean, the great thing about those sorts of opportunities are that they're all just going to grow the pie. I mean, you mentioned earlier on the possibility of other competitor platforms and so on. If they can aggregate some liquidity that's coming from somewhere else, actually, it's fundamentally going to be good for you because eventually you'll have the block platforms and all sorts of other people taking an interest in that because that will further allow them to come in and take business. But certainly the options business strikes me as very, very exciting at this juncture. The difficulty is clearly, can we replicate American levels of liquidity? Because the one I always like to talk about is options in Ferrari race. You look at that when it's sitting on Borsa Italiana, and I mean, you can't just get a Ferrari through there. Good grief, you could get the entire cast of the Fast and Furious essentially drifting buses through the middle of the bid-offer spread for much of the time. And of course, the attraction in after-hours trading has got to be if you can manage to make those amazing spreads that you're getting in US single name options overnight, or indeed US indexes overnight. That is going to make an incredible possibility.
Yeah, I think they have to figure out how they build the liquidity. Maybe you don't start out with every option chain in the world. Maybe you start out with the VIX and the SPYs and Qs and things like that, and kind of build the liquidity in those products and expand it out as the demand is there, and just start out with some of the more popular names that the Asian retail group might want to trade.
Yes, indeed. It's a fascinating opportunity. And if you're providing the core liquidity in the stock market, that's got to be absolutely superb for everybody who's looking to manage to take out their volatility quotient. So therefore, that is a huge opportunity, whether you're doing it or whether you're simply providing the cash basis for what goes on elsewhere. Look, Brian, it's an absolutely sensational conversation. I remain more enthusiastic actually now after talking to you for the best part of the last hour about this incredible issue. I mean, really, it is a new market tide for Blue Ocean trading. Rather than try and go into more aspects of all of this exciting multi-billion person opportunity, I suppose I've got to come to that point where I ask you the question we ask everybody at this stage. Brian Hyndman, where do you think the capital market revolution goes next?
It's a great question. I go back to an old phrase: as much as things change, things remain the same. And if you look at the U.S. equity business over the past, quarter century, decimalization in 2000, regular mass, you have limit up, limit down. Not a whole lot of change has happened over the past 20 years anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what we're doing here at Blue Ocean, while it's not that unique, it's really extending the trading day. It is unique because we're giving investors around the world the ability to manage their risk real time and to trade U.S. equities during their daytime hours. I think that's where it's going, right? So the genie's out of the bottle, ship has sailed. This is where it's going. More and more brokers are signing up. More and more brokers want to offer 24/5 trading, not 24/7, 365, 24/5. The light is pretty bright now. I see that is where it's going. Industry clearinghouses like NSCC and DTCC want to go there. I know that the trade reporting facilities will start to go there real time. We'll start to work on corporate actions and how we can kind of unify them and everybody can handle corporate actions at the same time because our day starts at 8 o'clock. We're blazing the path. There's some hurdles to get through. We're getting through them, but I see 24/5 U.S. equity trading is here to stay.
Plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose, but 24/5. That's coming or here to stay, ladies and gentlemen. What an exciting message as we look at this whole new market tide of Blue Ocean trading. It's been joy today to have Brian Hyndman, the CEO and president of the company, come in and talk to us all about these very, very, very exciting issues. I remain more excited than ever about the prospects of this platform. Also, I think it's fascinating, actually. Here we are 25 years on from the dot-com bubble, and a lot of people have forgotten about first mover advantage. And a lot of times, first mover advantage has ultimately proven to be an incredible curse. But I do believe, Blue Ocean, you are definitely on the path where having first mover advantage is giving you a huge opportunity in this marketplace. It's going to be so exciting to see how your journey continues. Brian, I really hope you'll come back and talk to us again when you break through that 1% level in the US marketplace, and we see how you're developing with more flow from the institutional side and so on. It's going to be so interesting to watch your performance. I wish you all the very, very best. I hope that it's a very propitious and wonderful one for your investors over there at Urbana Corporation, the Tokyo Stock Exchange, and indeed also Robinhood. Next week, ladies and gentlemen, we've got another fascinating issue. We're going to be going to Africa. We'll have the former CEO of the Botswana Stock Exchange, Thapelo Shole. He is en route to heading up the regulator, the SEC of Botswana. You'll learn a lot more about a very, very interesting, dynamic, fast-growing niche economy. One to compare with, we had, of course, the boss of the Namibian Stock Exchange on just a few weeks ago. Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this show, please do leave us a like or a comment. Please do also consider Exchange Invest subscription if you're not already, so that we can pay for the opportunity to bring you these exciting discussions about new market tides, the opportunity that's going on in the world. Thank you very, very much to our fabulous commenters today, Jeff Cutler, Rob Label, and Christian P. Great questions, one and all. And I just want to say huge thank you to my fabulously dynamic production team today. Well done to Natalie, Rushelin, Herminia, and indeed also Mary. Did a great job. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Patrick L. Young. Thank you very, very much for joining us today. We'll be back same time next week. And of course, every day we'll have the water cooler of the Bourse business coming to your inboxes via exchangeinvest.com. Thanks once again to our esteemed guest today, Brian Hyndman, and a great show, Blue Ocean, a new market tide. I wish you all a great week in life and markets.